You are listening to the Light Over Time podcast with David Sargent and Korey Bartos.
Hello, everybody.
Yo. Every time.
I tried to beat you this time.
Yeah, it's all right. I purposely waited for you to talk. So we got a spicy one today. I was gonna start with what we're drinking, but I don't really care. I'm just gonna not waste any time to get you going to our first topic, which is this Aurora Borealis show.
Oh.
I'm sending you right into it. We're gonna
Okay.
go for it. I watched the video last night. It's pretty spectacular. If y'all don't know, there was a pretty wild storm that I'll let David get into in a moment, but he has a pretty stellar video that I'll have in the show notes to watch, because honestly, as far as like real-time video of a show, it was kind of nuts. So I'll just let you take it away and kind of talk about what that was, kind of the information getting into it, what made you go, okay, I definitely got to go out and shoot tonight, and then kind of just like what it's like chasing those storms.
All right, sure. So if I can set a little bit of history, I've been shooting the Northern Lights for almost as long as I've been shooting. I started doing astrophotography just 1 year after I picked up a camera, which was I started shooting in 2012, so I've been doing astro since 2013, so 10 years now. And it didn't take me long to understand that we were in a position here in Northern Michigan to somewhat frequently get opportunities to photograph Northern Lights. So I've been doing that a long time. I've probably seen close to 100 different displays of Northern Lights, and of varying intensities and varying whether or not it's even worth being out there for. But this was one of those that was absolutely worth it. You've probably seen image after image, probably some videos, because this was one of those storms that it's kind of once in a lifetime, especially if you're not an avid chaser like I am. If you're not, and you just happen to like be outside that night, you're probably never going to see a storm like that in your life again. The last time it was of similar intensity and the type of storm that it was June 2015. The last time I saw one like that, and the data that backs that up also tends to show that the everything that has to align for the Northern Lights to happen aligned in a similar way to the show that we got in June 2015. So it's been a while since we've had one like that. And it doesn't even have to be half the strength and just nature for me to want to be out for these types of shows, right? So it was probably about 5-6 o'clock in the evening. It's still plenty light out, and I have this app on my phone called Glendale Sky. Maybe we can link that in the show notes. One guy in the UK develops this app, and this is just a one-man show. It's kind of like his side gig, but he spends pretty much every day keeping it alive, because at this point, on nights where there's expected Aurora Borealis, he gets like 1 million hits on his app. So for him to keep this running is costly, and he does a really, really good job. Andy Sables, I think his name is, shout out. He's a wonderful guy, super helpful app, but it's extremely technical and super overwhelming. So if you don't already know what the data means, probably don't get that app until you go on like spaceweatherlive.com or something and read up about all the little variables that have to align for the Northern Lights. Okay.
Now for people who aren't really familiar, what's like what are the couple of like really prime data points that you look at and go, okay, maybe it's worth going out?
Okay, so there's a few. The high points are KP, which is kind of like a generalization of, it kind of represents likelihoods based on all the other data points, and the KP is like the what the news stations like to hook onto, but it doesn't always align with what the data shows. It's just kind of like a conglomerate number, right? So KP, let's say like 4 or 5 is like, okay, probably worth going out for, because it might be good or it might be nothing. Anything above that, the data is probably going to represent something pretty worthwhile. If you want to get just like the next level, because KP is not really reliable if you understand the rest of it, there's something called the BZ. There's something called hemispheric power. These two things are much more important. when you go on to like spaceweatherlive.com, or when you go and find the specific NOAA page for the Aurora Borealis tracking, because they do daily tracking, you're going to see this ovation model. It's a visual graphic of what the geomagnetic storm is kind of doing in our atmosphere around the globe, particularly in the northern hemisphere, and they do have a section for the southern, I believe. And what it's going to show is like this big green band that circles the Arctic Circle, basically. And then the thicker it is, the more likely we're able to see it at further south latitudes. So like latitude 45 is kind of like pretty much where, if it's even a bit likely, that's kind of like the limit point. Now, last Thursday, I was seeing pictures from people who were taking them in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. That is extremely rare, but I believe it based on what I was seeing that night. So anyway, back to me sitting in my living room at like 5, 6 o'clock in the evening. I looked at the app. And what's so amazing about this app is it's kind of community supported. Andy has this feature where if you're a member and you've been there for a while, you can upload a picture of what you're seeing and tell and tag it whether you see aurora, whether you see clear skies with no aurora, or whether you just see clouds. And then it kind of pins it on a map so you can see where in the world people are or are not seeing aurora. And I was seeing it. What's nice about that, him being in the UK, is he has a lot of photographer contacts in the UK who are using the app, which means for us here, about a 4-hour time difference, we get a bit of a preparation period. If they're seeing an amazing show 4 hours ahead of us and it's still light out here, that gives people in the States here a few hours to prepare and go, okay, they're definitely seeing something that's going to hang around for at least the next 4 hours. I'm getting outside. So that's about the time that I decided, all right, it's time to get packing.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah, it's really handy because the other apps out there, if you just go and search Aurora Borealis or like Aurora Tracker apps on the iPhone or Play Store even, none of them compare. They're all going to use the KP. They're all going to give you these little bar graphs that show you, oh, it's supposed to be KP 5 or 6. They're pretty inaccurate. Unless there's like an extreme spike, there's probably a reason for that extreme spike. They just take the generalizations, and you can go out on a KP5 night, get nothing, go out on another KP5 night and get an amazing show. So
yeah, so that's generally how I've always done it, right? Like I'll look, and when it's saying like there's a freaking storm, yo, that's the only time I really care, because that's when I know I should go out. But what you were saying, that's not so nice. When I've always chased them, I've been in northern Minnesota, right? So like I have the luxury of I'm usually free in the evening. It's usually clear up there, and I'm so close that all I need to know is that like it's gonna happen soon, because I get to go outside my cabin and like find a cool spot to set up.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that you were using it so preemptively to be like, oh no, it's a for sure thing. Like I'm going out today, because I probably would have drove up if I knew it was gonna be even half of what I saw. So
I was thinking maybe it was worth the
yeah.
drive, but I didn't want to tell that to you, knowing you probably had to work in the morning, you know?
Yeah, I don't think I would have cared, but like there's no real way to know that it was going to be so spectacular, right?
No.
Like,
so when there's a solar flare and a solar ejection, right? The mass that has to pass through space towards Earth and hit our atmosphere in just the right way, we usually get 2 to 3 days warning, depending on the speed of that. We knew there was a solar rejection, but the data didn't really suggest that it was going to be so perfectly aligned to give us that type of show. So nobody was quite prepared until the day of, which is kind of short notice for most people. So yes, I use that app. There's lots of data points. It's one of the most up-to-date pieces of software. Like this app, you can't go somewhere else where that amount of data is pulled into one place and keeps it up to date as frequently as that does. It uses 15-minute intervals to tell things like hemispheric power and BZ. And back to those data points, hemispheric power, if we're above like 50, I think it measures it in gigawatts, something like that. If we're above 50, that's kind of where you're starting to go, okay, it's probably worth maybe going out and taking a look, and then it can climb up into triple digits on the good nights, right? BZ is another important one. So hemispheric power is more like here's the general potential intensity. So like potential energy, right? The BZ, I can't think of what the actual what the acronym stands for, but this is whether it's positive or negative type of thing. If the BZ is positive at all, 0 or above, it's kind of like a light switch, as kind of what we like to say. If it is positive, you're almost not going to see the aurora unless all the other variables are peaking at insane numbers. If the number drops below 0, even -1, your chances are much, much greater for whatever reason. I don't understand the actual reactions happening relative to the number, but all I know is that when the BZ goes south, your chances are much, much higher, and the further south, the better.
Why go into it more? That's perfect. Like,
yeah, it's too nerdy baby. To really dig and care. Right. So
Sub-Zero, let's go, baby.
That's it. So hemispheric power, BZ, those two are like the better numbers to understand. And looking at the ovation model, you can kind of understand what's happening throughout the day, and you can kind of see the trend of, that green band is building and building and building and getting thicker and bigger. It's probably going to peak out. So what happens is when it reaches back around to the states throughout the night, that's kind of where it peaks in the middle of the night and then starts to fade away, usually when the storm hits at during the middle of the day or early in the day. It definitely depends on when the impact hits. So anyway,
yeah, this is like a pretty base, like what you need to know to get into like chasing the aurora.
I'm
You're
sorry,
definitely
dude.
not like a meteorologist or
no.
Yeah, which is cool, which is fine. Like I don't think we need to go too technical, but this is helpful because like I like to have this,
for those of you,
spoken about.
Yeah, for those of you on like Facebook, there's a couple of groups out there that are super helpful if you don't want to learn this stuff. If you go out and search for Great Lakes Aurora Hunters, or if you're in Michigan Aurora Chasers, those groups are huge. And if you just want to know if people are seeing the aurora, get on those groups and probably put notifications on or something so that you don't miss that. Because when the aurora is happening, especially like that, you're never going to miss a post by them. There's too many. So that's a good hack for that. So anyway, yeah, it was about 9 p.m. I got out there after I got the kids to bed. And I met a couple of guys out there who were already shooting at Fisherman's Island, where I like to go here in Charlevoix for a lot of different reasons, but it's pretty good for astro as well. And there was a couple of guys out there, which was a little unusual for the middle of winter because not a lot of people put the effort in to get to that area, but they did. So that was cool. We hung out. They happened to know me already, which was funny. And it was cool. We got to shoot, and then they went home at about 10, maybe 10:30 p.m., which I wasn't going to tell them like, hey, the data is like looking like it's going to get even better throughout the night, because they were talking about needing to get up at 6 a.m. for work. And I'm like, I'll just, let them decide for themselves. I'm sure they're knowledgeable. But they should have stayed out because it was insane. And I'm sure they got great images, but I was out there until 3 a.m. and I had 4 batteries with me for the A7C and the A7 IV, and they were all spent by 3 o'clock in the morning. It was nuts. I made the video. I didn't even intend to make a video. Once I got out at about 9 o'clock, I was looking at the numbers going, okay, if I even try to make a video, this would be the night to do it because the data suggests that it's going to be pretty powerful and you'll see it on camera. So I did. And right away, as soon as I got out there, it was just going bonkers, and it only got better from then on. So if you want to watch the video, you can see in real time what I was seeing, what I was shooting, and I show a bunch of images. It's pretty nuts. It was amazing, and it's the best show I've ever seen in my life. There are a couple close second and thirds, though, but certainly once in a lifetime if you don't chase this stuff as often as I do.
Yeah. So for those, I know there are some listeners that have been kind of kicking around that are far less technical than us, that don't like do a ton of shooting yet. And thank you for listening. You guys are awesome. For someone who is interested in the aurora, and I have these conversations at camp every year because I'm the nerdy guy that wakes people up at camp and says, hey, you should probably come outside. People don't understand like how much of it you can really see on like a normal night, and how much is like the sensor intensifier, which is like ISO, right? The digital gain that brings it up to the point where you can kind of see it as vibrant as you can in your video. So like if you can, it's very arbitrary. There's no like, perfect way to describe it, but based on like the image that I'm seeing in your video when you're doing your talking head and it's like moving like crazy behind you, because I'm gonna link the video. You have to go check it out because it's actually pretty nuts, and it was going on for so long. How much of that was like truly visible? How much of it was like a little bit of a haze? Because I've seen it pretty decent as a haze in Minnesota, but I don't have any context for like what your eyeballs were seeing.
The shape, definition, the kind of mass of it you see, it does still look pretty like milky, pretty translucent. You don't see the color. You just don't. I feel like at times you can see hints of green and hints of magenta, and that's been the case before on good nights. But the camera is just so much better at picking up color at night. Our eyes, human eyes, are just not that great at that. People tend to get upset online when they see images that are even somewhat edited, and they feel like they're being cheated out of some kind of experience when they're looking at images online going, hey, that's not what it actually looks like. But there's this conversation to be had about artistic representation. And honestly, if you just take like a raw photo unedited, it's still going to look better than what your eyes see. It's just the nature of how our technology works. And everyone who owns a camera, whether you like it or not, it's your creative decision making that goes into how we all see the aurora online.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's photons hitting a sensor.
Yes.
And you know, an RGB, you know, pixel deciding that, you know, that color is going to be however much percent that green. But like, so I've definitely seen green and purple. That last show that I took photos of last summer, where I was like, this is actually nuts. It was depressing that I was having such a horrible phone conversation while I was taking those amazing photos. But and I'll throw some of those on the screen as well with some of David's from this last time. It's wild because for me it was so cool to see that show. It was the most I've ever seen in person. But it's so much less than these images and these videos. But I've even seen cell phone videos now where you're like, I know for a fact your eyes aren't seeing that good. Like, because I've seen them and I've seen them popping off. But like, I feel like now it's even harder for people who have never seen them to understand what they really look like because the cell phone does it so well. And you're like, there's no way. It's just like full on, like moving like this. And it's like super, super cool. It's cool when you can do it with your cell phone because then you're like actually enjoying it in real time in a way that we couldn't before. But
yeah, I'd love to talk about that for a moment because I've been around long enough doing this because, you know, it was only a couple of years ago where phones were just utterly incapable of doing anything at night. And in these groups that I'm in on Facebook and whatnot, there's plenty of people who don't have a camera who go, hey, I really want to see the northern lights. Can I use my phone? And it used to be the answer was no. It was just like, no, you have to buy this camera and get a wide lens with a fast aperture and all that stuff. And that is not the case anymore. When I do my workshops, I even tell people now, it's like, hey, if you've got a phone and you don't want to buy a camera, you can still come on this workshop because we are talking about the principles of what's going on. Anyway, now we've got night modes, astro modes. The camera sensors are a little bigger in phones. In some cases, they're much better than they used to be. And I'm seeing so many images of people who have iPhone 10, you know, up to the newest ones who are able to capture the northern lights and the Milky Way and the stars at night in a way that our DSLRs were doing only 5 or 6 years ago. Computational photography is really just punching up in this area for people. And I love it because it's accessibility like we've never had before. So many people get to experience what was isolated to photographers with this kind of knowledge for a long time. And now, if you have a tripod or just a really steady hand, you can get images of the aurora and all that stuff going on at night like you never were able to before. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's super incredible. I think it might have been Peter McKinnon or somebody else recently. He was out during one. It was a YouTuber photographer. I'm pretty sure it was Pete, but he like didn't use his camera at all. because he was just having a good time, and he took like a bunch of photos that were pretty freaking solid
Wow.
of the Aurora. And I was like, okay. He's like, yeah, it wasn't his first time seeing him either, so it's
Sure.
not like he was super motivated to like go grab an R5 or something. But it was just so interesting that like the shots were definitely good enough. Like a lot of the people at camp who would like to be out there on the lake and seeing them, if they were able to get those images on their phone, they would have loved the hell out of them, right? So it is pretty impressive, though. As a kind of sidebar, I can't remember if it was the Pixel or if it was a Samsung of some kind, but there was some kind of scandal where their computational photography like replaced the moon or whatever,
Yeah.
which is hilarious.
It's a few different phones. Samsung was the most recent one. Yeah. Where
Okay,
if you zoom in 100 times,
yeah,
their data of the moon, because it's tidally locked, is representative of the way the moon always looks as a full moon. And so they just overlay what the moon looks like. Yeah. That's a little unfair.
So funny. It is super unfair. But yeah, it's just so much that they can do with those, even those tiny sensors now, to not only just boost the ISO a ton, but they're doing so much to like, I don't know if it's like, cutting out certain like luminance so they can make like the more compressed luminance for like nighttime mode, like more intense. Like they got to be doing some kind of stuff with their hardware and their software, right?
I can speak to that a little bit, because in astrophotography, really hardcore astrophotography with professional cameras and whatnot, we do this thing called stacking, where you take multiple images and stack them together, and you median stack them to reduce or let's say improve the color accuracy of the pixels, or in other words, you reduce the noise, right? This is what's going on in these cameras. When you, like on my phone, my Google Pixel, you hold it, you set it to night mode, and then if it detects that it's on a tripod, it'll turn to, instead of like the moon, it'll turn to stars, I think. And that's when you know, okay, it's going to be able to take up to a couple minutes worth of an exposure. But if you know anything about photography and long exposure photography with the stars, the longer you go, the more the stars streak. Except when you're taking multiple images and then stacking them together, and then it does this computation where
it can correct for the rotation.
It corrects for the rotation, and then it fixes everything. It does so much in that little processing time after it's done, where people like us who had cameras and take it to their computers later that night or the next day, we do this median stacking, we'll take it into Photoshop and correct it ourselves, and that all is done without any input anymore. It's amazing.
Yeah, and if you haven't been doing astro for a while, I'm not going to say that I'm an astrophotographer, but I definitely did it with my 7D back in the day, right? Like years ago. It was a lot of manual work, unless you had like honestly some kind of janky software you had to pay for that wasn't Photoshop. Like that was dedicated to, there's a couple really good time-lapse ones and things like that. There's some that you can develop like proper star streaks if you want to do like the full warpy thing. There was some dedicated software, but now it's getting like this stuff's getting baked into Photoshop. It's getting baked into all this stuff where they're stacking, like you could stack 100 images together now and it'll figure it out for you and all that. It's so wild. It's basically like as easy as it. I don't know how it can get easier now.
No,
like, it's wild.
This type of work was a dedication to understand and to do. And now it's just done for you. You don't even have to understand it for it to be done for you, and you get this amazing result. So computational photography, we can have an argument all day long about what it does for the industry, but for the everyday person, having more access to something like this, where more people can go out and see the aurora and take photos, gives us the ability as people who are super passionate about the night sky to talk more about policies and things that actually affect our ability to see the night sky. So there's a lot of movement in different cities right now talking about what kind of lighting to use for street lights and buildings and things like that cast so much light in the sky. Light pollution is a huge topic of discussion in certain cities. And this is one of the avenues where more and more people are going to be able to have this discussion and have it relate to them like they never have before.
Absolutely agreed. I mean, I was out in, the desert in Utah was that 2 years ago, last year, something like that. And I was with a couple of my friends, and it was when they did the test launch for Starlink, right? and that was only like 60 satellites or something like that. And we were like, what is going to happen if they just decide that it's okay to put like tens of thousands of satellites that you can visibly see shooting along the sky? I was like, okay, well, if I was trying to do long exposure stuff or just like observe constellations or whatever, gone. That ability completely gone. And it was like, I remember, talking to my buddy Taylor and talking to, Tommy and Kyle, and like, it felt horrible. Like, it was like a weird, like, dystopia we were headed towards when like there wasn't gonna be a night sky, like where I was like, what's the next? Are we just gonna start seeing ads in the sky? Like, what's the move here in 10-15 years? Like,
Yeah.
cool.
I had
sky billboards.
I had a similar experience in August of 2020. Somebody, Travis Warner, shout out to you, driving out from Oregon or Washington State, in that area. He drove back to Michigan for family, but he hung out with me for one of the nights the Perseid meteor shower was going on, and the Aurora Borealis happened to show up that night too. And multiple times that night, Starlink came in, the big train of them. If you'd ever seen it and you were shocked by what you were looking at and came to understand it, you'll never forget it. It's just like, it looks like tons of big bright stars in one line just streaking across the sky. Totally, like, you don't want to say something like that ruins your shot, but it does, because it wasn't the intention of the shot, right? Like, if I intended to capture Starlink, that's a different thing. But I was like shooting the Northern Lights and the Perseids, and I didn't want that there. It sucked.
Yeah. It's so weird, and that's just a few of them, right? That's just
it was like 20 or 25 of them.
Yeah. And like we counted, so we watched it go across the sky. It took about 3.5 minutes, and then another 2.5 minutes later, we saw it off further in the horizon, coming the other way, orbiting. And we're like, dude, this is garbage. Because like, we're in Utah, dude. We were in the desert where there was no light. Yeah. Like, I could see everything. It looked like my eyes were HD. Like, wow. It was nuts. And I was like, well, that sucks. That's miserable. So I was like, this was going to be a really chill time. We had, some warm drinks, and we're hanging out, and we're like, cool. Thanks, Elon.
Unfortunately, you have people who are never going to have that experience and not understand how bad that feels. But more people having access to this technology at least gives them a foot in the door for that discussion. Because they don't, I can promise you, if you're listening to this right now and you've never seen Starlink, but you wanted to go out and see the Aurora, it's a distraction. It's not natural. We can say all these things, whether Starlink is worth having or whatever, but it sucks when it just streaks across the sky, and you don't want that kind of man-made thing just distracting you from whatever you're trying to experience.
Yeah. And like, what's the end, right? Like I said, what if it's tens of thousands of satellites, and now big corporations are fighting for airspace, and there's ads in the sky, and it's like, what is the end to just being able to like commercialize the night sky?
Yeah. Yeah, there was talk a couple of years ago about them using some less reflective material, and then supposedly they did, but they're still able to be seen pretty easily. So I have no idea what it's going to end up looking like a couple of years from now. It could be pretty awful.
Right on.
Like, we're just now on the cusp of talking about better lighting for on the ground here on Earth, just for us to ruin it in the sky.
Yep. Right. It's a pain. We'll likely talk about this again. It is pretty interesting.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, man. I'm glad you got out and saw that. Like I said, I'll flash a couple more of his images up on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, and obviously, his links for Instagram and stuff will be in the show notes as well. So go check out that if you're curious. Some of it was just like, it was like cheating. Like, you point one of those cameras that are, from the last couple of years where they're really good and the ISO performance. Yeah, you were shooting at like 10,000 ISO, and it's like, that's pretty clean, man. Yeah. Like, if I tried 10K on a 7D, I might as well throw that camera away.
Mm-hmm. It was like cheating, and they were so bright, like it was in all directions. I couldn't have picked a composition that didn't work with the Aurora. It was crazy.
Oh yeah, you're at like 0.8 seconds or whatever. Like, you weren't even doing super long
1 to
exposures.
2 seconds. It was nuts.
Yeah, that's super cool. I had a lot of fun that last time I saw mine, because I was over a lake, and I had caught them before, but they were all pretty tame. So I that show last summer was so good that I think I would need to see something like that one for it to really wow me because, spectacular stuff.
Yeah.
Get out and enjoy the night sky while you have it, y'all.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, my week wasn't as fun because I didn't get a Aurora show, but I do have images that I shot hanging up in downtown Kazoo right now, which is pretty cool. They got the posters that I took of this coffee, actually, downtown, and that's the first time I've ever had my stuff blown up and on display publicly. So that's
awesome,
pretty cool.
man. What sizes?
I don't know. It's bigger. It looks bigger than like a 16 by 20 print. So it's like in their window and stuff. It's like a pretty big print.
That's awesome.
I'll flash that on the screen because they took a photo of it and put it on their Factory Coffee Instagram. But
that always feels good.
But yeah, so they did like a run of posters and stuff. So they're like hanging up and stuff like that. It's like Kalamazoo drinks. And then it's like my hand. So my hand is blown up downtown, and it's the can of coffee, which is pretty cool.
That is cool.
Nice. I enjoy that. Obviously, I enjoy this coffee. I'm still drinking it because I don't have coffee stuff here at the house. But I tried it with milk and ice earlier this morning, and it's quite good. It is absolutely the best canned coffee I've ever had in my life.
Nice. All right.
I'm comfortable saying that now. So. Now, the next topic that I had today was the obvious that, it's all over the internet and everybody's talking about it, is that Amazon, the wonderful, wonderful place Amazon is killing probably the most important photography website on the internet.
Yeah. I mean, its relevance still has relevance today. And I mean, we can go back and forth on the stories of what we've ever needed to go to DPReview for.
Yeah.
It's sad, right? Like, do you know if there's any update on who and what is able to archive this right now?
All right. So for those of you listening, there's a website, if you're not familiar with it, called DPReview.com, and it has been around since basically digital photography started. And it was made because there was no place on the internet to talk about digital photography when photographers thought that it was just a fad and nobody gave a crap. And they're like, well, digital photography is going to die in like a year. You just watch. And here we are today.
Yeah.
So it's been around for a long time. And what they do really well, for those of you who aren't in the know about it or nerdy enough to care, frankly, they have some of the best, I would call it, scientific like comparisons for how sensors stack up to other sensors, how cameras stack up to other cameras, as far as having some forum space for conversation and just reviewing like consumer stuff and sharing news and things like that. It was kind of like the spot for good information on digital photography. And like a lot of the YouTubers have talked about this week, is like a lot of people really started there with their digital photography life. I came into it probably 10 years late because I didn't get really into photography seriously till 2010. But even then, I was using that adjacent to just looking at galleries on Flickr. Like those were the two resources for me, was DPReview.com and Flickr.com.
Yeah.
And it's pretty wild that damn, Amazon remembered that they bought them back in the day. Because if they just forgot for longer, it wouldn't even be a problem.
No.
But yeah, so Amazon was laying off a bunch of different departments and things like that, and consolidating probably for all sorts of reasons by, multi-billion-dollar companies do. And they decided to finally go, well, we don't really need this because it's not really profitable in a way that like Amazon is, optimizing profitability. But that means some of the most talented people that, test this equipment are hopefully not completely screwed, but like some of them I know, I think at DPReview.com, like the actual like testers and stuff, I don't know that they've landed somewhere yet. Chris Nichols and Jordan Drake are obviously like kind of spearheading talking about it because they're the DPReviewTV.com or .com TV YouTube channel personalities, right? But they were contract. Like they weren't like employees of DPReview.com. So they don't have all the info on where everybody's at. So they're just kind of trying to get people to, see where that happens. If there's anybody out there that's helping, try to collect some of these people. I hope they land somewhere. Linus Tech did have them on the WAN show. I was kind of hoping they'd scoop up some DPReview guys for the lab. They still might. Who knows? We don't know. It sounded like probably not on the WAN show, but you never know. You know, some of those DPReview guys might end up in Canada. It's real close to where they're at, you know. But yeah, so it's just kind of lame. As far as I know, to get back to your question, I don't know that anybody is openly archiving it. There's a bunch of people that are moving some of the information to different forums, but as far as I've seen, it's like, all right, Fuji people, come to. It feels like people are trying to more so just get people and users on their forums. It doesn't really feel like consolidating all the material. So we don't even know what's going to happen with the YouTube channel yet. As far as I heard on Jordan Drake's Golden Hour podcast with Dave Altizer last night, I listened to that when I went to bed, and it sounds like he's hopeful that they'll just leave it up because it doesn't, you know, they're not hosting it. They have no reason to delete the channel. So hopefully it just kind of stays in perpetuity on the internet. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think it's a huge loss for the community.
Yeah, massive.
It's one of the cleanest websites to find comparisons if you're trying to look for, you know, say you're trying to get like the 20-70, 24-105, and you're like looking at lens comparisons. It's a very clean place to get a lot of the information you need on gear.
Not only that, but DPReview, the site, is still so active. It's got an extremely strong community that engages on a daily basis. And there is, I mean, decades worth of information there, but not just written by the team at DPReview. The community puts in a ton of work, and they talk back and forth. Like I was saying before, I've gone to DPReview because I've had issues with cameras, issues with what I'm seeing in my files, and I'll go on DPReview solely because I know that there's gonna be people there who have seen and typed up the same things I'm seeing, and then you're gonna see all the experienced photographers come in, chime in, and go, this is what you're seeing, this is the problem, this is how to fix it. That's been the case probably dozens of times for me in my life of shooting. It's such an invaluable site.
Yeah, I mean, the forum is it's the photography forum. Like if you Google something about a thing and you need to know troubleshoots, DPReview is going to be probably the first place. There isn't really a runner up as far as an all collected review, data, news, information, forum, the whole shebang all in one spot. There really isn't something. And it was independent, you know. Jordan Drake was actually talking last night. Like, it's wild that it was such a feature, but almost nobody cared because it's something that they didn't notice. But they didn't run ads on dpreviewtv.com. On like the YouTube channel, right? So like you didn't get pre-rolls, you didn't get stuff like that because it was independent. It wasn't sponsored stuff, and that's really rare. That's so rare. It's such a special thing. So yeah, it's a huge loss, and it'll take a while, but something will fruit from it. It always does, you know, a Phoenix Fire or whatever. But you know, Jordan Drake and Chris Nichols will still be doing their show. I'm actually excited about their show on Petapixel because it sounds like Petapixel is going to give them a lot more like free reign, which like I hope that means they get to do like more Wooden Nichols stuff. If you're not familiar, they do like they'll take a scene from a movie and they'll try to recreate the whole thing. And they did it to like a pretty high level. They would get a DP and they would like really go for it, and they do really interesting stuff. Because this all happened, it was the first time I ever saw haters of Jordan and Chris, which I thought was crazy. I was like, man, they're the first place I look at when a new piece of gear comes out is I watch the DPReview channel for, you know, lenses and cameras and stuff, because you're going to get photo, then you're going to get video, and it's going to be condensed in a way that anybody can kind of understand and be kind of okay and fun. It was a very casual, good show in my opinion. And I'm just glad that they landed somewhere and they'll be doing their thing, because I don't know if I could deal with both losses.
Yeah. Say what you will about the state of Petapixel, or as it's been for the last few years. This is only going to help Petapixel, really. Jordan
Yeah.
and Chris being on there, providing the knowledge that they have and the likability and the credibility that they have. This is going to really help Petapixel a lot. And if that means they get extra resources, great. Because I can't imagine a scenario where Amazon basically just didn't even know that they owned them for a long time and probably had no contact of any kind for a while until they had to really buckle down. But yeah, if it means better resources for them and if it means helping out Petapixel, because that's what it's going to do, good for them. Do you listen to Jared Poland's podcast? Because he had a ton to say about this, and I was curious.
No, Jared rather is kind of like my wow, I've really ran out of content to watch this week, and I'll jump on because like there's just a couple of podcasts that are doing a little bit better of a job when it comes to like really information dense
Sure
stuff, and most of those podcasts had Jordan, Chris, or one of them on. So I was trying to get it more from their mouth before I was just listening to opinion stuff. So I haven't gotten to all of it.
The what it boils down to basically is he was of the opinion, and I kind of agree that Chris and Jordan could have been a success without Petapixel if they had just stayed independent. So what do you suppose the incentive was beyond here's a paycheck? Why do you think
they've talked about it? So I don't think that it's necessarily like a hidden thing. Like Petapixel isn't just gonna like get a gain. What they're getting is they're getting a team, they're getting resources, they're getting SEO, which is that's like huge. That SEO alone, they would do well with all the people that already know who they are. Petapixel's still going to bring them viewers that would have never looked up their channel. And that's just how that is going to work. Like it's definitely a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's definitely not weighted that like Chris and Jordan are just going to give them like the road to being a successful website. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's quite a lot in it for both of them, in my opinion. Just having the resource and the backing and stuff like that's probably huge. I mean, they're in Calgary, right? So like they're not in like a big city, and I bet it probably helps quite a lot. Otherwise, if they went solo, it would probably be kind of like on the coattails of the Camera Store still. Yeah. It's like Jordan Drake's wife still does the channel at Camera Store TV. So it's interesting. There's probably a lot more that we don't know about like how it helps out Chris and Jordan, but if it means that they get the freedom to kind of experiment and try to build something more interesting without needing to build their own teams up and stuff like that, then it's huge. Because they would have to just do the YouTube grind, which is like they're going to probably have to do some product stuff that they don't care about. They're dealing with two adult men who have families, presumably. And, obviously I know a little bit about them, but like they have a lot. They're adults with families, and you can't just like, all right, well, hope this channel works out. Right. It would suck. It would suck, man. I wouldn't choose to do it. I chose not to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm sure it was probably the sensible move. I think just the general consensus is the community would have been behind them 100% if they did decide to go independently.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And again, it was in their conversations for a while. So I don't want to try and paraphrase what they actually said, but he addresses it on the Golden Hour podcast. I think they addressed it a little bit on the Linus Tech podcast, and it was everywhere. So definitely follow those dudes on Twitter if you're into that stuff. Give them some support while they have this transition, and check out that Petapixel channel when they start making stuff. That stuff will start going up in May. The last of their DPReview stuff, I think, is trickling out through April. But yeah. That's my favorite channel. And like I survived moving from the Camera Store TV to DPReview with them. I'm sure I even tweeted out to Chris Nichols, I think. And I was like, yeah, I think I'll survive another move. As long as it's them making the stuff they like, dude, I'm stoked. And like I said, I hope they can get more creative because that's huge for me.
Yep.
Did you watch that WAN show, by the way?
Oh, I did. I stayed up to watch it last night. It was something else.
Yeah. It was crazy. The whole story of them getting hacked and things. I'm not going to get super far into that in this podcast, but it was wild.
Yeah.
For them to break down exactly how that happened.
It was a good breakdown.
It was so funny how like stoked on life Luke was.
Oh, yeah. Like
He
48
was like,
hours or something of nonstop adrenaline.
everything's on fire. I've been waiting for this day for years.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw out the conspiracy theory that this was all Luke's plan when he became CTO to have some stuff to do and
That's
spice
good.
up the world. I'm surprised that their channel was returned to them in like a relatively neutral state. That was wild.
Yeah, I imagine the connections they have for their reps and whatnot go pretty high. So,
Well, yeah, but like you got to figure those dudes did damage to their freaking
yeah,
channel.
a day of
like,
AdSense on just those 3 channels alone we're talking a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, and then just like publicizing a bunch of unlisted videos and like moving a bunch of stuff, deleting a ton of stuff, changing a bunch of descriptions, putting that crypto link in all of them and stuff. They still have about 15.3 million subs, and I'm sure once people were online and they were like, what the f is this Tesla stuff? And they're just like unsubbing from this like trash channel. It's just surprising. Like, I don't know how that works on the back end of, those servers, but I feel like it probably has like images taken over time for big channels. Maybe. I don't know. It sounds like it was a pretty crazy week.
Yeah, if you're into like 4.5 hour long freaking video podcast, this is the one to watch because if you watch Linus Tech Tips or any of his subsidiary channels, you probably noticed this, and they break it down pretty well. I think after the Chris and Jordan interview, they go into it, and it's it's a pretty interesting story, and it was amazing to me hearing it from Luke go, this is just how well our team worked together without even being asked to do specific things. They just knew exactly what to do, and they got right to it. It was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it's cool. I certainly found it interesting that like there's so much you don't think about having such an expansive team, and just how many points of failure there are for like getting hacked and all that stuff. So basically, if you're listening to this and for some reason you don't have, maybe not LastPass, but if you're not using like Bitwarden or have some kind of password manager, or you're just like password 123 and all your stuff, you should really like make sure you have systems in place to recover your accounts and everything like that. I would
at least actively change it once in a while.
Yeah, well, and they should be relatively complicated passwords,
Yeah.
and you should have 2-factor authentication, and
That
like
for sure.
You probably shouldn't just be, leaving sessions open on multiple computers for long extended periods of time and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, the point of attack was pretty interesting, what they were talking about with the session tokens and whatnot. It was something that
so like
we really
if somebody
hadn't
just
thought
like
about.
gets into your computer, copies all your cookies and everything, and then like bails out, you will never know they were in your computer, and all of a sudden they have access to some of your stuff.
Yeah.
So I know so many people that are like, no, I don't want to even use like CCleaner on my computer because then I have to re-log into stuff. It's like, dude, you should probably be resetting some things if you're on like year 3 of this is the same active session on my Facebook account from years ago.
Yeah, it was pretty wild.
Yeah, I re-logged into all my stuff, changed a couple of passwords that are a little long, and then like made sure my Bitwarden was up to date. And I actually changed my master password, which is incredibly long. And I go into like my points of I guess the level of security I need for certain websites, I trickle down versions of passwords, like the format of my password. So I'm using full sentences with random capitalizations and like number sequences on something like Bitwarden, right? So like you like have fun trying to crack like 46 characters of very different things. There's like punctuation and things that you have to get correct. And it's a pain, but
it's kind of necessary when you've got assets to protect.
Yeah, I certainly don't want somebody getting my Bitwarden password and then they have access to all my banks and all my other things, right? And then there's some stuff that I go so far as to it's just not in Bitwarden and it's at the same level as my Bitwarden password, right? Like if you're trying to get into like my social security stuff or my other things. Won't get too into it. But like it's your internet security is really important, and change your passwords.
Yep.
Don't password 123 anymore. Those days are far behind us.
Yes.
But right on. So I didn't really pick around for a lot of news and rumors this week. There's a couple that I wanted to talk about. I'll throw you kind of a curveball. How, if you haven't seen it, Samyang is basically copying the 35 to 150 F2 to F28 formula that Tamron did. I'm not sure how I feel about that. It almost cheapens Samyang to such a low level for me that I'm like, man, it's a Tamron lens formula you copied. Like, it can't be that good.
Yeah. I did see it. I didn't really look into it because I felt kind of the same way. Like, this is kind of a cheap move for even Sam. And it's Samyang. It's like they're used to that tier of kind of value anyway. But to see that was like, they just saw some inkling of success out of Tamron's interesting zooms and are trying to go for it, which is, it's a business move. It's going to probably sell, but you probably should buy the Tamron version if you're going to buy that lens.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, it's probably fine. That's better than any kit. Like if somebody was going to like, hey, I want to buy like a 3-year-old Sony and I want one really good lens, like that, that's probably a pretty good one.
Yeah.
But it felt weird. I was like, man, I don't love that you have every opportunity to kind of just like push the envelope and make some weird stuff, and you just decided to choose somebody else's weird stuff. That goes into the next topic, which is I'm really excited about. So the first one that I saw was that Sigma's CEO talked about a potential mirrorless 18 to 35. And if you've never used the Sigma 18 to 35 f1.8 and you've been in the game even longer than 3 years, I think that's crazy, because it's probably one of the best lenses that I've ever used.
I've never used it.
I just got rid of mine recently, actually, but I used it back on the 7D. I used it throughout my entire experience with the GH4 and 5, and it was just stunningly sharp. It was basically a crop sensor 18 to 35 1.8 set of primes. The zoom range isn't long, but it literally performed so well across the entire like focal length that it was so hard to beat for photography, and for crop sensor, whether it be micro four thirds or APS-C video. With a 0.64x Metabone speed booster on my GH5, I was like breaking full frame. That setup is nearly full frame in field of view and depth of field, right? Super shallow, super sharp. Chuck a mist filter on it, and it was cinema heaven back in like 2017. It was the best of the best of the best with honor, sir. And that makes me way more apt to look at the next future of like an FX30 or something, because I would slap an E-mount 18 to 35 formula that's like DGDN or DGDC or whatever it is for the crop almost instantly. I would just run that camera. So that's really exciting. I think that's going to be a huge move for the ZV E10, whatever that ends up being, like the E20 guys. Like, it's going to be probably one of the next like YouTube lenses. Everyone is going to probably recommend it as long as they get it right, and I'm sure they can.
Yeah, I never used that lens, but I do know it well because it was one of the most recommended lenses for a whole lot of uses. So yeah, of course, it would be wonderful to see that reiterated for mirrorless for sure.
Yeah, and then that comes with the same interview talking about getting into like more innovative designs, and I think Sigma's to a point where they're making essentially first-party lenses. The quality of first-party lenses, and if they start getting weird, like you and I have talked about on this podcast, they're gonna break some internet days. I think I'd love to see something like their 24 to 35 f2 full-frame lens, something like that. Don't just copy that and make it a DGDN, but like those, it's a zoom but basically primes style lenses I'm super into. We have the 28 to 70 f2 from Canon. Like, what would Sigma do? I'm super keen on that stuff, especially as a run and gunner. I mean, obviously I love the 20 to 70 because that range is exceptional, but make it fast and slightly bigger. What are we doing? Like, give me the lens that I don't swap off of my camera. I'm super into it.
Yeah.
If you were to design without thinking about physics or anything, your ideal lens formula from focal range to f-stop, barring anything ridiculous, like I want like a 24 to 120 f1.8 or something full frame, something that's not unrealistic, what would you?
What's funny is back on like the D50-300, the kit lens for that was the 18 to 55. I would love an 18 to 55 that was like a 2.8. If that as a kit would be amazing on full frame. Yeah. So I mean, that's not super unrealistic from a physics standpoint. It would have to be large,
Right.
but I would love to see that range because I'm shooting 20 now, and at 1.8, it's really awesome for astro. But even at 2.8, if I had the range to go to 55, 55 at 2.8 can produce some really nice portraits, I would imagine. So that would be a range I would love to see.
Yeah, like a proper 16 to 35 killer.
Yeah.
Because like, yeah, I'm into that. Sometimes I look at 16 to 35 and I miss having that focal range for full frame, and I go, but like I have a 35 prime, which I'm gonna want on the 35 end, and the wide end ends up being so small. What am I got? Like I got 16 to 28, and then obviously I wanted the 16 to 28 for that exact reason, but 18 to 55, now we're talking like this 20 to 70 f4 situation. You're like, oh, that's like I could leave the house for an entire weekend with that lens and be totally fine.
I mean, there's a reason it was the kit lens. The range is nice. I would just like to see better performance, background separation, things like that. If they could really beef up that range, I'd love to see it.
Yeah. I mean, a full frame equivalent, it's the 28 to 70 formula, basically. So you're talking like a wide standard zoom on a full frame, which is like, it's just interesting. It's a space that I think is probably hard to do optically, which is why they don't push that envelope down to 2.8 anyway. Obviously, they make pretty decent stuff at f4, 16 to 50s or stuff like that. But yeah, I think that'd be cool. Yeah. The 16 to 55 APS-C lens that the 2.8 that Sony makes is quite good. I've only used it very briefly, but that feels like a super premium lens for APS-C. So if they could build a formula a little bit bigger, make it like at least as good as a G, Sigma would have something there. That'd be cool. Yeah. I don't think I had an answer, so I was just curious what you'd say.
It's just the top of my head because Go ahead.
I was going to say I happen to agree. I think that'd be a pretty cool lens.
Yeah. I mean, like I was going to say that a lot of people who first get into photography, that's the first lens they touch, or at least was the case when like the D50-300 and that era of cameras were really popular. That's the kit that was pretty much the one to come with unless you upgraded to the 55-200 or whatever it was. Before we sign off, I wanted to tell you and the listeners, I finally did get out for a photography morning with no video. I thought it was important to say I did nothing coffee video related at all. I took my A7 IV with the 150 to 600 and did some wildlife photography for a couple of hours. Had a nice morning, just capturing some geese and swan and some ducks, and it was just great. I had a really good time. So I got that for myself. I got my fix for a while.
That's a win. Don't say for a while, because it's about to get a little warm, I think. And it's going to be pretty nice to get out and shoot.
Oh, yeah.
I'm excited. We had like a breath of a really nice day. And then yesterday it snowed its butt off. Just big flakes of snow. And I went and saw John Wick 4 with Evan and Hope. And we were just like this the whole ride. We were like, why is this happening? I guess we chose a good day to watch movies. We ended up also... Hope had never seen Joe Dirt. So after John Wick 4, we made her sit through Joe Dirt. She actually liked it more than John Wick 4.
Oh, funny.
John Wick 4 wasn't very good, but unfortunately, but it happens. There was a really, really great pupper in it, though, that made it worth it for me the whole time.
There you go.
And then after that, Evan recently updated his receiver down in the theater room that he has. And so it has Atmos. And this didn't have proper Atmos, but it still had like Dolby Surround. And we watched Top Gun Maverick, which was my first time since I saw it in theaters during its open. And that movie is so damn good. Fantastic. Like it basically isn't a sequel. That's how good it is. If you disagree, I don't like you, and you're just wrong. Because it's so hard to make a movie decades later that's a sequel to another movie, simultaneously like having good callbacks to it and making it like well written and emotionally like driven, and then still absolutely just crush it. And I think they did that. I think it was a really hard thing to do while also taking on all the crazy technical stuff they did for that film. And like, wow, it was just such a good time. And then we followed it up by watching a bunch of stuff about real fighter jets on YouTube for a while.
Nice.
It was pretty sick.
Awesome.
So yeah, not a whole lot of shooting, but good movie stuff this weekend. But the weather is shaping up. There's sun today. I'd like to try and get out and shoot something. I'm at least gonna go down and do a selfie for my Instagram story next to the factory coffee poster that's hanging up in the window before that's done. So I do want to do that. But yeah, I guess we'll see what happens next week. Thank you guys if you're still listening. You know, make sure you hit us with the old follows, sub on YouTube. All the links are below. There's a lot of photography going up from that Aurora. You know, David always tells you it's super easy to drop a review on the Spotify. We would love to see that. Our few dedicated listeners, you're the best.
You are. And if you're on YouTube and you do happen to go out and photograph the Aurora, why don't you drop a comment in the YouTube video and tell me your Aurora stories?
I would love to see that. I'd love to see what you guys have, especially if it's not from Minnesota or Michigan, because I've seen a lot from those places. Heck yeah. Well, that's the show. We love y'all, and we'll talk to you next weekend.
Thanks, guys. See ya.